Hello, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Opportunity China's fourth and final Teach China Graduate Programme webinar for the February 2020 intake. Thank you very much to those of you who have watched our previous three this week, either live or online and catching up, and thank you very much for joining us again today. This evening we're going to be talking about making the most of your China experience. Now, this might seem a little bit far in advance or a little bit in the future, but it's never too early to start thinking about the skills and the ways in which you're going to develop that will help you with your future career progression. Whether that's going to be in teaching, whether that's going to be working in a variety of different corporate or public sector roles, or whether that's going to work in NGO or charity sectors, there are all kinds of skills that you will be able to attain throughout your time in China to help you progress in the way that's right for you. So what are we going to take a look at today? We're going to start by taking a look at the key transferable skills that all of you will attain throughout your time living, working, and teaching in China. We're going to be taking a look at the graduate program Future Pathways and the routes that you may look to take once you finish your time in China and the help that you can receive in taking those routes. We'll take a look at how best to sell your skills, both on paper via your CV and in person at interview. We'll also take a look at the core learning points from living in China, the main takeaways that you will have, and ways in which you'll find it helpful to conduct yourself to get the most out of your time in China on the ground. Let's take a look first of all at our key transferable skills. This is going to be a very broad overview, and we're going to take a look at transferable skills that all of you are going to attain through your time in China. We are going to be stopping once again after each section, so please do feel free to put any questions that you might have into our chat box, and we'll be more than happy to answer those either after a section is finished or an Opportunity China coordinator will do so immediately in the chat box. First of all, let's take a look at the transferable skills that you can attain from international work experience on the whole. Now, when I speak about international work experience, I mean experience such as internships, experiences such as teaching in China, experiences such as living abroad for a prolonged period of time. When it comes to international work experience, I say it in a broad sense because this is a real hot topic at the moment for recruiters. Recruiters are finding it more and more valuable in a globalized world for potential recruits to have international experience, to have cross-cultural experience, to the extent that more employers now actually value international professional experience over a master's degree that's relevant for the job that they're looking for. This shows you how important international work experience actually is. International work experience is demonstrable of a number of different attributes: communication and language skills, confidence and self-reliance, independence, and flexibility and adaptability. Now, when it comes to communication skills, yes, there is a hard element of the language skills that you will attain living and working in China, but there's also, really importantly, a cultural communication skill that you're going to attain as well. In the previous webinars, we took a look at some core cultural concepts in China and went through a few scenarios of how something might go wrong or how something might be misinterpreted. The communication skills that you're going to bring to this job will help cross those borders because of your familiarity of working in those uncomfortable situations. Something that is a real unique selling point and something that a lot of competitors for a role may not necessarily have. Confidence and self-reliance are obviously incredibly important attributes to have for whatever role you're going to be looking at in the future. Having the ability to be able to step out of the dark and volunteer yourself to take on a role is something that all employers look for. People who are confident to be able to step above the mold. Living and working in another country again demonstrates this in troves and really will help you when it comes to finding roles abroad. Making sure you find all of the attributes and examples of times in which you've demonstrated this, making a list almost as you go along, is a useful way of keeping tabs on these elements of international experience. Independence, going out on your own to a different country, showing that you can cope with upheaval, showing that you can cope working on your own is again an incredibly important attribute in the professional world. And flexibility and adaptability. Well, there's nowhere better in the world to gain these skills than in a country where things are so fluid, move so quickly, and can change instantly. Being able to put yourself through a few hours or a few days of discomfort in China will really, really help you become a durable and flexible professional individual and put you far above other people who have not had to be placed in situations where flexibility was a must-have. But when it comes to experience, there is, of course, a big key China element to this. So what are the core transferable skills that you're going to be able to attain from a purely China standpoint? Well, the most obvious is the ability to attain demonstrable familiarity with China. Demonstrable familiarity with a culture in one of the world's most competitive and sought-after markets. Again, no matter what you're doing, China is going to be at the center of it. The 20th century was the century of the United States. The 21st is the century of China. Getting in there early, getting in there in the ground floor, getting in there before 99.9% of the other people who will be your peers in the Western world is going to be a massive boon for you in the coming years, in whatever area you look to work in. There's also the hard skill of attainment of Mandarin skills. Now, whilst you're living in China, you're going to have the opportunity to learn the world's most spoken first language in a truly immersive environment. You're going to have the opportunity to speak it day after day, to make mistakes, to learn from those mistakes, and to be able to hone your skills in a way that learning purely academically in a Western country will not give you. You're going to need to take this, and this will be one of those transferable skills that won't come naturally, as it will require a certain amount of work. There's also the ability to be able to explain core cultural concepts in China to those around you who are going to be working with China potentially in the future, or the ability to be able to look at things, even if you're not working with China, but in an international context, within a context of, okay, is this problem culturally related? Is there something we need to take a look at, as opposed to stopping something in its tracks that with just a little bit of refining could work out well? And also the ability to utilize guanxi, those connections that we were speaking about yesterday, to the benefit of yourself and organizations that you may work for or alongside. There's also teaching specific experience. Now, teaching gives you a huge range of different skills and attributes that can be transferred to almost any role. Most obviously teaching roles, of course, and getting practical in-class experience for teaching if you want to go on to teach in your own country or want to go on to teach in another country or have any kind of teaching, mentoring or tutoring role in the future. Getting that practical in-class experience teaching in China is going to be absolutely vital and almost the most obvious transferable skill within all of this. There's also the opportunity to receive references and notes of praise from this as well. The opportunity to have your progress logged and fed back on. Organizational skills and presentation ability. These are transferable skills that you will attain through being in the classroom that can be used in any context. Presentation ability in particular. Standing up in front of a class of 40 to 60 Chinese students will be far more intimidating than making any presentation at any boardroom in the future. Communication skills and management abilities will also be refined during teaching processes. Once again, managing a class of 40 Chinese students who don't speak the same language as you is a skill that very few people will have. An ability to be able to do that demonstrates a strong managerial skill, as well as a strong communication skill. The ability to be able to show care and attention, as well as patience to those around you, is another incredibly important attribute to have in this day and age. The ability to be able to manage people with different personalities from different backgrounds in a context of care and patience, and also dealing with difficult stakeholders. Working in China, you are going to have stakeholders such as parents or colleagues who have wildly varying priorities. And staying on top of that can be a very difficult situation. Showing and proving that you've been able to handle those stakeholders is again going to be a skill that will come in useful no matter what role you find yourself in the future. So let's take any questions that you have on transferable skills before moving on. Okay, just remember, if you do have any questions at all, please do pop them in the chat box. Let's take a look now at the future pathways. The pathways linked to the Teach China graduate program that are open to all those who are participating. The first pathway is the teaching pathway, almost the most obvious of them. The teaching pathway offers you the opportunity to utilise your graduate programme experience by joining a host of government and supported education training programmes. Graduate programme participants have trained to become teachers across the length and breadth of the United Kingdom, as well as in numerous other countries. Through doing the Teach China graduate programme and deciding once you've finished to take the teaching pathway, you have the chance to speak with an Opportunity China mentor to help you with your application and set about recommendations based on your personality, skill set, and what you want to gain from your postgraduate program experience, the best type of journey and the best type of institution that might be next for you, whether that's through a skit, a university, or through a private training organisation. Opportunity China has a vast knowledge of all of these different institutions, as well as links with many of them as well. To give you a recent example, one recent Opportunity China Teach China graduate program alumni, Zoe, finished her role teaching in a public school in Shenzhen before coming back to the United Kingdom and working through a private training organisation to work at one of Opportunity China's partner schools in the UK, in the city of Southampton. We've also had alumni go on to study their PGCEs at universities such as Manchester, Oxford, and many others as well. We also have a number of graduate program alumni going through the option of working with local authorities through skits, and Opportunity China works alongside a number of skits to help teachers get direct classroom teaching experience whilst training to be full-time teachers in the UK. Then there's the corporate pathway, the pathway for those who want to go into private enterprise and business. Teach China graduate program participants have successfully entered into corporate graduate programs across the world through the help of their graduate program experience and the ability to be able to demonstrate those transferable skills that have been given to them and the support from the Opportunity China staff in the UK. Examples of those who have taken the corporate pathway and the roles that they've gone into and graduate programs they've gone into include HP, Accenture, Virgin, and many, many more. In terms of what we're able to offer, we can help provide relevant references and bespoke references related to your time in China. We can help you and assist you in keeping all of your progress throughout your time on the graduate program correctly logged in order to ensure an application goes well, and make sure you utilize those transferable skills as best you can through those graduate program links. You've also got the government and not-for-profit pathway. Again, many Teach China graduate program participants have utilised their experience to enter a number of different government, NGO, political and not-for-profit and charity organisations. A few examples of those include the civil service Fast Stream in the United Kingdom, working for international charities, working within fields such as art and entertainment in China and also in various other countries, working within embassies around the world, and also working for political organisations, with a handful of Teach China graduate programme alumni going on to work for political parties and some working for political think tank organisations. Once again, like with the corporate stream, Opportunity China will offer tailored references and guidance to all participants who are looking to go down the route of the government and not-for-profit pathway following their experience in China. Does anyone have any questions on the future pathways? Okay, well, let's move on to selling your skills. So this is going to be a very important aspect of your postgraduate program experience. It's going to be, how am I going to take those transferable skills? How am I going to take all of those things that I've learned throughout my experience and put those down in a form or express them in a way that is going to be effective and going to get me into my next role? Well, first of all, there is your CV and where you're going to need to sell yourself there. It's important that on your CV you keep a very core focus on your accomplishments and skills gained. Bullet point sections under your teaching experience that are relevant to the role that you are going for and that contain lots and lots of keywords related to those transferable experiences for international experience and China experience that we mentioned before. With a CV, it's important to keep it succinct and it's important to keep it on one or two sides of A4 paper. There's nothing employers hate more than receiving a CV that has more than two sides to it. If you're printing it out, have a side on the front and a side on the back. Ideally, just a side on the front. If you can keep it to one page, that is the absolute dream. There's limited space on a CV, so any unrelated part-time jobs, keep them to a very small section of just a small list. They would much rather see a more relevant experience and a more unique experience, such as this international work experience that you are going to be attaining through the Teach China graduate program. Make sure each CV is tailored to individual roles as well. So once again, if you are going for a teaching role, focusing or making an application for a PGCE course or a skit or a private training organisation, making sure that you focus on those hardcore teacher skills that you have attained throughout your time in China. If you're going for a corporate role, if you're going to work for a company, then you might want to focus on international experience and some of the points that came through there, your flexibility, your adaptability, your ability to be able to work with a number of different people across a range of different cultures if you're working for a large transnational corporation. If you're going to be working for a government or not-for-profit, you might want to focus a lot on the empathy and the ability to be able to understand core cultural concepts in different countries, the ability to be able to have that empathetic approach to others around you and work within that context. It's important to be as concise as possible. And one real top tip when writing a good CV is to have numbers to back up claims. So, for instance, if you're working in a private language centre, and your classes were particularly popular and you managed to sign up a huge amount of students, you can show your doggedness and your ability to be able to graft and make money for that company by saying that there was a 200 or 300% increase in sign-ups during your time teaching classes, or focusing on the attention that you put to the side of improving the numbers of students that were coming from it as well. Then, of course, there's your interview. Now, your interview is very different to your CV. One of the big things to say is that you will be asked about your international experience at your interview. It is going to be a unique selling point. So remember to sell it. It's going to be the big thing that will stand out in your CV. There are more and more graduates with good degrees from good universities going into the same kind of roles with a bit of domestic experience. This is going to be the thing that in the future will set you apart. What's most important as well is that you really paint a picture during an interview. You show passion, you show enthusiasm, and your ability to be able to articulate. It's so important never to use single sentence, single word answers. It's important to always remember to know your achievements and think about them and phrase them in an anecdotal manner, especially when it comes to dealing with tricky situations. Make sure you have those stories prepared. Make sure you have those examples prepared to really tell a story about yourself, to put a narrative about what kind of person or employee you're going to be, and as well to display just how important and how relevant that China teaching experience was. Remember that the key selling points of international experience and China experience are going to be the things that will set you apart, most likely from another 5 or 6 people that might be interviewed in the same day as you. So making those lists, looking at those core selling points, looking at those anecdotes and preparing those stories and narratives for your interview are going to be what sets you apart. Does anyone have any questions on selling your skills and selling your China experience? Okay, well, let's move on now to learning and living in China. Let's move on to some of those really key elements that relate to living in China that you're going to carry forward and keep with you, potentially for the rest of your life in both a personal and a professional context. Now, the first one that springs to mind as a former teacher in China and a former expat in China is the China rush. The pace of life in China is frantic. Things move so fast, there's very large crowds, there are hectic schedules that can appear during the day, and ever-changing environments with new skyscrapers, new roads, new attractions, new schools, and new changes in policy that affect day-to-day life springing up every single day and every time you're around. There are also tricky cultural situations that come along with this. You're going to be able to learn to preempt problems. You're going to be able to learn to deal with this large, enormous, and occasionally stressful pace of life. Those of you who come from sleepy towns, villages, and cities like I did will very quickly learn to adapt to a much faster, pacier, and frantic way of life. And what this certainly does is it gives you an efficiency and a pacey style to the manner in which you are working. You can often tell former expats in China when they come back to their home countries through the fact that they just work a little bit quicker than they did before they went out there. And they work in a way where they get things right a little bit more. They have a perspective from both East and West when it comes to working attitudes. And this is an enormous benefit and something that you'll carry with you throughout your life. So remembering to take those skills and learn from those skills when things get stressful in China, think and wonder, okay, well, how will adapting to this situation help me grow as a person, both personally and professionally in the future? And those tricky situations also help improve your ability to be able to resolve disputes diplomatically. Again, those who have lived and worked in China are often better able to see things from very different perspectives and better able to preempt potential problems and potential fractions that might arise in both personal and professional relationships, as well as displaying the ability to be able to mediate those kinds of situations. There's also the point in which you will attain a heightened sense of cultural sensitivity. Now, this isn't just for people from China, but for people from around the world. Having lived as a foreigner in another country where you are so different, there's a tremendous level of empathy that you will attain and feel for people in your own country who perhaps struggle with things at particular points. And you'll naturally begin to take on a form of mentorship role with people who you work with and who you are around. This is an enormous benefit, an enormous personal learning point that you're going to attain from living and working in China. There's, of course, the language as well. Now, the language when you go to China can be quite a scary prospect at first, not least because you are going to be surrounded day to day by a language with which you will likely have no foundation. For those who are going to be going out to China, only a very, very small fraction of schools that you might have been to will have had Mandarin Chinese as a language option. And because Mandarin Chinese is not a Roman foundation language, it is a very different language, a completely different structure, a completely different foundation, a completely different manner of writing. It is a language that's much harder at a later stage in your life to get a real grip on. But what's most important is that you're not afraid to make mistakes when you first go out there. You're not afraid to practice day to day, because having that immersive environment around you genuinely is the best way to practice, the best way to be able to learn a language, to hear it, to get used to it, to be able to speak it. Now, living and working in China gives you the opportunity to learn not only the language of the most important emerging country in the world, but also the world's most spoken first language. Giving yourself that benefit is tremendously important. But it's not just for you that these skills will see a benefit. It's for everybody who is around you. And it's for those who are around you who maybe are struggling with language themselves, because an increased level of empathy will arise. When I work in situations with people in the UK now whose English isn't so good, there are times where immediately in my head, even if I would press it down, I'd perhaps feel slightly frustrated that I couldn't get my point across or I wasn't able to speak with them. But now there's a tremendous level of empathy and also an ability through having taught English to help them along and try and understand what people mean. It's almost like a tiny little translator gets implanted into your brain that's able to help you understand more on both a personal level and a linguistic level. It's also, of course, a much sought after skill, a hard skill that you will be able to attain with some work and you'll be able to hold on to and will stay with you for the rest of your life. And then, of course, there are the connections. On a personal level, connections that you'll make in China, especially through the notion of guanxi, the communitarian spirit that exists in China, and the way in which people interact with one another as a group as opposed to a set of individuals, means that you are going to make amazing friends who are going to stay with you for life, who are going to stay in contact with you, who are going to show you hospitality, and who are genuinely going to make an enormous impression on the rest of your time. It's also a great opportunity for future development. Once again, in China, everything is about who you know, not necessarily what you know. And going through these networks, going through these contacts, you may find a whole new thing that you want to do at the end of your time teaching in China that is within the country. You may find people in China who want to work with you back in the UK, who want to open an office branch in the UK and have you manage it. Now, this is something that's happened before. Making these connections via guanxi for your personal development and professional development is incredibly important. But of course, for those of you who are entrepreneurially minded, for those of you who want to go to China to try and seek out the next big venture or big entrepreneurial escapade, then these connections are going to be absolutely vital. Former Teach China graduate program participant actually set up their own business and utilized their connections in China in order to help create a market for the products that they're exporting. Now, of course, it's hard to do so, but it would be impossible to do so without being in China, using your guanxi and making those connections. Now, all of these things, connections, language, and being able to get used to the China rush are going to be the elements that I feel will stick with you most for the rest of your time. But before we finish today, our webinar's a little bit shorter than the others. Does anyone have any final questions on anything to do with any experiences they might have in China, on anything to do with selling yourself and selling your China experience once you're finished, or anything whatsoever to do with China or with the graduate program? Okay, excellent. Well, thank you all very much for joining me today for our final webinar, and thank you all very much for joining us this week. It's been an absolute pleasure to deliver these once again. As always, if you have any further questions, please do put those to your Opportunity China coordinator and they'll be more than happy to answer. But otherwise, I hope you have a lovely rest of the evening and an excellent festive period. Thank you very much and goodbye.